brakes test 4X. Brakes test 4X. Okay, these anti-lock systems, there's a bunch of differences between various different anti-lock systems, and we're basically going to look at the, when you hear the word, when you see the thing CAB, which would be cab, you know, controller, anti-lock brake, and hydraulic control unit to HCU, see, on the Chrysler stuff. All right, that's an integrated control unit. Now pay attention to your questions and all that stuff right here. All right, and let's see. The ICU is located on the left side front suspension cradle on minivans. You see a question about that anywhere? The integrated control unit is located on the left side front suspension cradle on minivans and on the left side of the engine compartment on Cherokee and Grand Cherokee. You got me? Alright, your controller anti-lock brake controls ABS operation by activating valves in the control unit. We've seen that before, how it operates. What are the valves called? You remember the two types of valves that you're typically going to see in a hydraulic control unit? Anybody remember from the previous? Yeah, well, you got an isolation solenoid and you got a dump solenoid. You got one that's going to dump the pressure that's already there if the wheel's sliding, and you got another one that's going to isolate, just, you know, to keep brake fluid from going in there making it slide. But your pump, when it needs to, you know, operate again, is actually going to fire up and cause your brakes to apply on, you know, some of these systems. You know, but all right. So let's see. There's two different, you know, cabs available on minivans. Those have got the ones that have ABS and traction control. Use one that's different from the ones with ABS only, and there's a label provided for identification. If the cab needs replacing, be sure you're using the right part. Not too complicated there. Because the cab and the HCU are together, is there a question about that in there? Is the cab and the HCU are together, wiring has been simplified. So there's a new 25-way connector that it replaces the old 60-way connector. So you got fewer wires. That's smart, you see. New diagnostic software makes it easy to diagnose and easier to service than in the past. Now you got to be careful with these. I'm going to tell you why. There was this minivan out here that Jimmy Hutto drives. It was a Dodge Caravan. It's an 05 model, and it was throwing us a code for a no, I'm sorry, the scan tool we had available at the time, which I didn't have the one I've got now, wouldn't talk to it and tell us what the codes were. ABS light was on. There was a problem. And I was basically, and found out when I got to looking at the wheel speed sensors that one of them wasn't producing a signal. So basically, if you pull up your wheel speed sensors and you look at how fast each wheel is going, you can get an idea of where you need to be looking, right? In other words, you're going to see it. This is not rocket science. You see your wheel speed, and it's going to see left and right, there, and you'll see, you know, if it's got in the back. And this one here was the right rear and the left rear, and it was telling me the right rear one wasn't putting out anything, and so I go back here and I'm doing all this checking. It's a Hall effect unit, and it's not one that creates a sine wave. It's a little square wave creating unit, and so I got another one of those, made sure the wires were good going all the way back here, and I put another sensor in it, and we still had the ABS light, and everything was like it was. And so I got kind of disgusted with that because the tool that I had wouldn't talk, and the only tool I knew of that would talk to that particular van was the one that Donnie had over there at his shop. And so I put, I think I put Amanda in that van, and I let her drive it over there to Donnie's shop. And my scan tool was lying to me about which sensor was which. It was the left one that I needed, but it was telling me it was the right one. I don't know. I had actually, back when I was working with at Ford dealership, I was working on a Ford Contour that had ABS problems, and I got in there, and that stupid Ford scan tool, the laptop scan tool, lied to me the same way. It transposed those sensors, and it put me to working on the wrong side. So if something is not making sense to you, you got me? Go to the other side and check that one. That's all I can tell you, because you're not always going to have the factory scan tool unless you happen to be working at a dealership. Just keep that in mind, that sometimes the scan tool may lie to you. Well, his would pull the codes, and it would also tell that read the sensors right, and the scan tool that I was using here at the time wouldn't do that. So, you know, just go there. Anyway, attached to the cab is the HCU. All right. During an ABS stop, the hydraulic control unit regulates the hydraulic pressure at each wheel brake assembly, and 2 different ones are available on the minivan, like the controller, brake module. Different HCUs on minivans. In other words, if they got traction control, it'll have a different unit on it. That's the long and short of it. I kind of stumbled over my words there. The pump motor on the hydraulic control unit is this round thing sticking up. It looks like a fan motor, as you've seen it before. That's actually the internal of the HCU valve body. It provides brake fluid pressure to the system during ABS braking, and there's 2 pump assemblies, one for the primary hydraulic unit and one for the secondary hydraulic circuit. There's solenoid-operated valves in the HCU that control the flow of hydraulic fluid. Inlet valves provide a fluid path from the master cylinder to the wheel brakes, and outlet valves, and your inlet and outlet is a good term you were using a while ago. Outlet valves provide a fluid path from the wheel brakes to the fluid accumulators in the pump. So the HCU on minivans has 4 inlet valves and 4 outlet valves, 1 pair for each brake circuit. Pardon me. Hello? Hey. Uh-huh. Right. Right. I've got a gauge over here I use for that. Are you driving the vehicle today? Yeah, bring it and we'll look it over. All right. All right. But, anyway, HCU on minivans has got 4 inlet valves and 4 outlet valves, 1 pair for each brake circuit. Minivans with traction control have 2 additional valves called isolation valves, and they're also located in the hydraulic control unit. Have you guys answered any questions so far?
Not that.
Any see them? During traction control activation, those valves prevent brake pressure from being applied to the rear wheels. In other words, the first one, remember that? Like if you're pulling with the rear wheel. Huh?
Number 8.
What's that? Number 8?
No, it's the rear wheel. Isolation valves.
Let's see here. Number 8. On minivans with traction control, isolation valves are used to what? A, prevent braking pressure from being applied to the front wheels. Front wheels. B, applying braking pressure to the front wheels. Prevent braking pressure from being applied to the rear wheels, or apply braking pressure on the rear wheels. Now see, question number 8, according to our handout here, says during traction control activation, these valves prevent brake pressure from being applied to the rear wheels. So that sounds to me like A is right, doesn't it? No, excuse me, I'm sorry. You're right. But you know something that I'm bothered by that? And Chrysler put this handout together and they put this test together. And the issue that I've got with that is the minivans are front wheel drive.
Wait, hold on.
But listen, wait a minute. Let's parse this. Think about what we're talking about here now. If it's front wheel drive, the only ones that need to have brake pressure delivered to them for traction control purposes, and we're not talking about anti-lock brakes. We're talking about traction control. It's going to fire up the pump and it's going to ratchet brake pressure to the wheel that's spinning, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so they don't want this thing to be putting brakes on the rear wheels because they're supposed to be rolling free. They're not spinning and digging out in the mud or the wet grass. So you don't want the back wheels to get any pressure when it's sending pressure to the front. So it isolates the back wheels and it starts driving one, if the right one's spinning, it's going to apply pressure and force the left one to pull, or vice versa. You see, so that's why you're isolating the rear wheels. Got me? You understand that? Okay, so this is a critical thinking issue here. I mean, if you start thinking about this, you can understand, wait a minute, it wants to isolate the back wheels because you don't want any pressure going back there when you're trying to go. If you start putting pressure to the back wheels, it's going to keep you from going anywhere and think you're spinning worse, isn't it? Okay. The hydraulic control unit on Cherokee and Grand Cherokee is a little different. It's got 3 inlet valves, 3 outlet valves for a total of 6. Each front brake circuit is controlled by a pair, while the rear brakes are controlled in tandem. You got that? No. All right. The hydraulic control unit contains 2 low-pressure fluid accumulators, 1 for the primary circuit and 1 for the secondary circuit. During ABS braking, hydraulic fluid from the outlet valve is stored in these fluid accumulators.
Another student in the summer.
Oh yeah, definitely, sure. Yeah, I would have one. All right. Mm-hmm. All right, there we go. Now, let's see. Let me make sure I'm all right. All right, so during ABS braking, the hydraulic fluid from these outlet valves is stored in the fluid accumulators until it's needed by the pump. You know what I mean? So when the pump needs fluid, where does it get it? It gets it from the accumulator, right? In this particular system here. A noise dampening chamber on a secondary hydraulic circuit dampens fluid pulses from the pump to the master cylinder. A lip seal saver on the secondary circuit is on the secondary circuit on vehicles without traction control, and that protects the master cylinder seals during ABS stop. You know, because you don't want to blow the seals on the brakes, you know, by getting froggy there. In order to detect wheel slip during braking, the cab uses input from front wheel speed sensors. These are 4 wheel sensors, one at each wheel. One at each wheel. Now, you remember on the Chevrolet truck that we were talking about, like that green GMC out there, it's measuring the speed of the drive shaft because it's controlling both of the back wheels based on whether the drive shaft is turning or not. Got me? As far as that. So it's actually looking there. Now, that one there doesn't have traction control on it, so all it's doing is it's going to stop the back wheels from sliding, you know, to spin you around and all that kind of thing. In order to detect wheel slip during during braking, the cab uses input from wheel speed sensors. There's 4 wheel speed sensors, one at each wheel. And on all the vehicles, the front wheel speed sensors attached to the steering knuckle. You've seen wheel speed sensors. Everybody seen one? Mm-hmm. You know what they look like? You know, they got a tone wheel. You know, they're putting out some kind of a signal that the computer knows how to opt to parse. And I'll tell you something else that happens. On a lot of these vehicles, this wheel speed signal is actually picked up by the ABS module and sent over to the engine controller to determine vehicle speed. So a lot of times if we're already reading vehicle speed from the wheel speed sensors, why not go ahead and let the computer, the powertrain control model, use that? Pretty smart, isn't it? The rear wheel speed sensor on a minivan is mounted to the rear wheel bearing assembly. On Cherokee and Grand Cherokee, the rear wheel speed sensor is located to the outboard end of the rear axle. That's out right by the wheels when they say outboard end. And that, in order for the wheel speed sensor to send accurate signals to the cab, it must have the right size tires. Now, let me ask you this. If you had a donut tire on there, that would cause some issues, wouldn't it? That's why most of the minivans have got a full-size spare, you know. Yeah.
So, number 1, this is like the valves, proportioning valves are located on the Cherokee and Grand Cherokee. Would that be C at the rear brake outlet ports?
Basically, the proportioning valves, let's see, did I say something about that already?
Like, I don't know, the things you're saying, they're like dancing around every single question we have.
Yeah, that's great.
A lot of what you're saying isn't even...
Yeah. Well, yeah, Chrysler wrote the test, huh?
It's going to be on the frame.
Yeah, the proportioning valves, well, on this particular vehicle, well, you know, think about it there. They're going to be, the rear brake outlet ports on the HCU. Now, proportioning valves go to the rear brakes. Let me hit you with this. On the Oldsmobile, if you look at the Oldsmobile, if you look at the brakes going, the lines going to the brakes back there, you're going to see something in that line that almost looks like a little fuel filter or something. You're going to see the brake line coming along here, and you're going to see a little thing here that's got, looks kind of like that. And it's going to have the brake line screwed into both ends of it. That is a proportioning valve that limits the pressure to the rear brakes. And that's, every time you see anything like that, it's to prevent you from going into a skid on an icy road. You see what I'm saying? They don't want this. They don't want these getting any pressure back here until a certain amount of pressure has been applied up front. You know, it's kind of like a pressure regulator valve for the back brakes. Because if they lock up first if you're going around a curve and let's say you're going 50 miles an hour on a curve that's kind of got a gentle curve to it, and the road is real slippery. Like if it's got black ice on it, and you happen to, and all of a sudden there's a deer that comes across the road, and he's close enough to where you're going to have to hit the brake. You better not have those back brakes start locking up before the front ones do, or you're going to go into a spin, and then you've lost it. Now, on your pickup trucks and stuff, ever since 1987, pickups and vans have been required to have rear anti-lock brakes. But rear-wheel drive vehicles, like the Oldsmobile, like a lot of front-wheel drive cars, they'll have a proportioning valve in the line. It's an inline proportioning valve going to the back brakes. But on this one here, it's actually in the ones going back to leaving the HCU, basically. So look at the front one there, at the rear brake outlet ports.
On the frame.
No, they're actually at the rear brake outlet ports on the HCU on that one.
Mine's on the frame.
Yeah, they are. Well, yours is. Now, on that Ranger you're talking about, yours is actually the RABS valve, the ABS valve, and it actually doubles as a proportioning valve on that particular one. But on this particular one with this, high Tech ABS unit is going to be mounted in that HCU. They're going to package all that stuff together. You know, they're not going to spread components all over the place unless they have to put wheel speed sensors in the four wheels, but the hydraulic stuff, they're going to cram it together, and with the exception of your, you know, the calipers and the wheel cylinders have got to be at the wheels. Ain't no way about that. The master cylinder has got to be attached to your brake pedal. That's got to be spread out. But whenever they can, they like to stuff every other hydraulic component in there, in that hydraulic control unit. And they also are getting to where the point where they're making the electronic part of it, you know, bolt right there onto it. So it's all one big unit there. Now you can change the hydraulic part of it without buying the hydraulic control unit, but it's still bolted on the hydraulic control unit. Okay, just get a good thing of this, and and I'm going to try to get us through with this pretty quick, so we shall not surely die. Let's see. Each wheel speed sensor operates with a tooth sensor ring called a tone wheel. Creates an AC signal, and that's on the older ones. The newer ones have a square wave signal. The cab uses to monitor wheel speed. On all minivans, the front tone wheel is part of the CV joint. You've seen that before, right? I think I got one over here on the floor that's got a tone ring. No, maybe not. Yeah, I do. No, I don't. I thought it did. It's dark down there. All right. The rear tone wheel on the front wheel drive minivans is part of the rear wheel hub. And that's usually the guy you're going to find that. Now listen, guys, whenever you're getting brake rotors and CV axles and all that kind of stuff, it's a good idea to make sure that you understand where that tone ring is. I have actually called, like I said earlier, I called Sam, and he didn't ask me if it had any lock brakes when it came in. Didn't have it on there. Tell you something else, we put some bearings on a Dodge Dakota in here one time that didn't, I mean, whenever the bearings actually came in, we found out that the ones they originally sent did not have tone wheels on them for the ABS. And of course I wasn't holding the student's hands, and this is what was weird. They managed to get those hubs put on there and they fit just fine, but there was no tone wheel for the ABS sensors. And did you know that they drove that truck for 2 days before that ABS light came on? I don't get it. It totally bumfuddled me. So I says, we kept, you know, we were seeing that they weren't reading anything, and I said, that's strange. So when I got looking up there with my flashlight, there was no tone wheel. Isn't that something? All right, now then, let's see. So pay attention to your tone wheel and make sure that. Oh, and if there's any metal filings that are stuck to the sensor, it'll cause all kinds of issues too. And some of these bearings have actually got the little sensor is actually in that seal for the bearing. And on my top of my desk in there, I've got this little thing you can hold up, and you can see if that thing has got integrity. A lot of your General Motors hubs, the hub bearing, you can't even see that tone wheel, but you see wires coming out of it hooked to your ABS. And a lot of times when that bearing is noisy, you'll also have an ABS code because it will have, you know, compromised that sensor in there. Let's see. Here's something else I'm going to tell you while I'm thinking about it. Those, when you turn in your wheels, what are those wires doing?
Flexing?
They're bending back and forth, right? And a lot of the times, don't put your head down. You either, Sean. Sean's going to sleep too. You guys are dozing off in here. It's got to be really boring when somebody's talking about ABS, right? Okay. But anyway, when you turn the wheels back and forth and it bends the wires again and again and again, a lot of the times you may, this is what smacks you around. You replace the ABS sensor and you still got the same code. And you know you're on the right wheel. Let's say that you hadn't fallen prey to this swapped wheels syndrome. You look at those wires really careful because I've actually seen them where they've bent back and forth so much going out there to it that they broke the wire. And this is the wire leading to the sensor, leading to the wire going out to the wheel. To the wheel feed hub, I've actually got a picture of one of those where it just popped, and the wire actually bent back and forth enough where it just broke and it was in two pieces. Okay. Let's see. Cherokee and Grand Cherokee, the front and rear tone wheels are mounted on the outboard end of the axle shaft. In the event of a brake system failure, 2 warning lamps are used to alert the driver. Both, there's an ABS warning light and the red brake warning light. They're both on the dash. One of them's red, one of them's amber. And both of them are located in the message center on minivans, instrument cluster on Cherokee and Grand Cherokee.
So like on number 3, it says on Cherokee, which is the following condition which will cause the red warning lamp to illuminate.
That'd be B and C. I'd like. What about that on Cherokee? Let's see what it talks about. We're going to see what they say here. If the cab detects ABS-related fault, it'll disable the ABS to illuminate the yellow ABS warning lamp. Okay, now we're talking about the yellow one now, so don't get confused. But although the ABS is inoperative, the base brake system, so they're not going to shut down. You might even notice that even when your power steering fails, you still have steering. Right, so I mean, that's what they're going to do. If your power brakes fail, you're still going to have brakes. You may have to use a muscle leg, but you don't have brake. You can still stop. Okay, in addition to illuminating when a fault is present, ABS warning lamp is going to illuminate at key on during the cab self-test and during certain diagnostic mode operations. Sometimes when you plug the scan tool in, the ABS light will come on and stay on the whole time you got it plugged in. The red brake warning lamp, now listen to this, will illuminate a vehicle startup for bulb check and when the parking brake's applied. And on minivans, it'll illuminate when the brake fluid level is low. And on Cherokee and Grand Cherokee, a fluid pressure imbalance between the front and rear brakes will cause it to illuminate. So, okay, fluid pressure imbalance. But I guarantee you, on the Cherokee and Grand Cherokee, I'd be really surprised if it didn't come on when you're low on fluid too. You know, correct me if I'm wrong. Minivans equipped with a traction control have a traction control switch on the left of the steering column, and it's used to disable or enable traction control operation. And a track off message in the instrument cluster is going to illuminate whenever the system is disabled. Now let me say one more thing while I'm thinking about it. And I know I'm keeping this in here longer than I usually do, but ABS is important and it's stuff that you're supposed to understand. Judy McClaney's minivan, she had a little Pontiac Montana that she drove for a long time. Whenever we would go to drive off, now you may see this sometime, we go to drive off, we would get a traction control activation just normally driving off. Usually when you're spinning the wheel on wet pavement you'll get it. But hers would go brrr, and it would turn on the traction control light. Brrr, and it would do that. So, but when we put the scan tool on it and managed to catch it, it didn't do it every time. But when it managed to catch it doing it, the right hand wheel, even though we were going 3 miles an hour, was reading 22. And it was a screwed up hub. That screwed up hub over there, we put a hub on it to fix that. But that right front hub, when I had a picture of the little scan tool, it was reading 22 miles an hour when we're pulling off. Now this stuff right here, you know when you're just sitting here hearing me talking about it in class, you know, if you're saying, I'm bored, this sucks, I want to get out of the shop, but I just want to be done with this in here, you're going to get burned because, you know, these other people that go out there say, I wish I could go back and listen better. That's what they're saying. I wish I could pay more attention to the lesson, but listen to what I'm telling you. This is important stuff.
So when the drive off cycle, then what mile per hour should it reach before you?
Well, if it's got one wheel spinning faster than the other one, you know, if it saw 22 miles an hour on the right wheel and 3 miles an hour on the left, it's assuming that right front wheel's spinning. It wasn't, but it assumed it was. And the pedal's bouncing under your foot and you're getting a traction control light. That's what's going on with Pontiac. And that's going to vary software. It's slightly different from car to car.
I'm talking about the postponement of the test.
Yeah.
So when will you postpone the test?
Postpone the test.
When you're doing the drive off, in the drive off cycle.
All right, I think I'm going to get that in a second. Cherokee and Grand Cherokee use an acceleration switch. Now, what's an acceleration switch for? Mercury switches. They want to know if you're stopping or going. All right? You got that? Now, why would they just do that on Cherokee and Grand Cherokee? If they're four-wheel drive, right? Okay, so when you're in four-wheel drive, it needs to know if you're moving forward in space, if you're accelerating, or if you're stopping. Because in a four-wheel drive situation, all your wheels are subject to be doing
Is that what
things.
they call the G-switch?
Yeah, it's a G-switch. That's exactly right it is. Mounted under the floor. Now listen to this. It's mounted to the floor pan under the rear seat. And it provides forward and rearward deceleration information to the cab through 3 Mercury switches. And those Mercury switches actually slosh, you know, back and forth. The Mercury sloshes and it closes terminals inside that switch and all that. And the cab uses that input to determine the conditions for anti-lock operation. And there's various fuses that can be found in the junction box, the power distribution center, blah, blah, blah. All right. Okay. The cab is a dual microprocessor unit that controls all ABS functions, including detecting wheel locking tendencies and control fluid flow to the wheel brakes. Inputs to the cab include all 4 wheel speed sensors, ignition voltage, battery voltage, ground stoplight switch, diagnostic communication, and on Cherokee and Grand Cherokee, the G-switch. All right, so you got all that. Wheel speed sensors, ignition voltage, battery voltage, ground stoplight switch, diagnostic communication, and the G-switch. Cab outputs are HCU solenoids, ABS warning lamp, diagnostic communication, on minivans, CCD bus communication to BCM. Got me? Okay, so you got HCU solenoids, ABS warning lamp, diagnostic communication. Now power for the cab is provided by the ignition switch when it's in the run position. Circuits A10 and A20 provide direct battery feed to the cab. and they're protected by fuses. Blah, you know about that. The wheel speed sensors send an AC signal to the cab, and the cab monitors and compares wheel speed. The G switch is an interesting little thing, and we talked about that a little bit the other day. The G switch works through 3 internal mercury switches. Switches G1 and G3 provide forward deceleration rate. So if you're stopping, boom, it knows it. It knows when the vehicle is stopping. This ride stabilization actually looks to see if you're pitching or yawing too. See, it wants to know when you're moving this way and that, so it can operate a certain number of brakes to bring you back under control. Your truck's probably got that. Let's see, the G2 provides the cab with rearward deceleration rate information. Now, what does that mean? If you back up, you're stopping that way, see? So it wants to know if you're stopping going forward. It wants to know if you're stopping going backward. With that input, it can differentiate the road conditions when the ABS is needed. For example, on a road with a high coefficient of friction, such as dry pavement, it's going to respond different than it will if you're on, vehicle with like snow or ice or something like that. But all the switches are closed normally and all that. Let's see. And I could talk a lot more about G switches, but I'm not going to. Under normal braking conditions, ABS is not used. You knew that, didn't you? Okay. If a wheel is locking tendency is detected, the cab's going to modulate the inlet and outlet solenoids. You got anything like that?
Where are the inlet and outlet valves located?
Yeah. Huh?
Number 2.
Number 2?
Yeah.
Well, they're going to be in the HCU, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right, there you go. All right, the whole cycle is going to occur first when the inlet and outlet valves in the ACU are closed. They're going to hold brake pressure steady. That gives the cab time to determine the degree of wheel slip. How much is the wheel slipping? How much are we sliding? This is not traction control. This is ABS. The cab runs the pump motor. We'll continue to run it throughout the ABS stop to ensure the initial volume of fluid provided to match the cylinder is maintained. But this is a dicey thing. That's one of the reasons they use that high-speed CAN bus for ABS. Because this vehicle dynamic stuff like this has got to happen really, really fast. In the decay cycle, the pressure is released at the affected wheel or wheels to prevent lockup. All right. Number 5, wheel speed sensor circuitry is checked by the cab during which test cycle? What about startup cycle? Would that be right? B? Okay.
Was number 4 was the decay cycle?
Let's see. During ABS operation, when is the pump motor initially run?
I'm not sure if you went over.
I would start it up. I would say when it starts up, because it's going to check it, right, when you fire it up. All right. Then the cab will modulate the inlet and outlet valves in the HCU to the affected wheel, and it's going to cause it to go through the whole decay and build cycles to apply pressure. That's what you're going to feel under your foot. Have you ever felt that thing bounce under your foot when you're doing ABS stop? Like yours probably does. But the cab will deactivate traction control when the spinning wheel slows to match the non-spinning wheel, or if the brake pedal is pressed at any time during traction control operation. Traction control is automatically enabled at key on. If the driver chooses to drive without traction control, I got to turn it off every single time, and so on and so forth. All right, let me look here. Which questions are we still shy on, guys?
Right here in the little shift
Yeah.
little button.
All right, has everybody got one? Where are the portion valves located?
See, at the rear brake outlet port.
Okay, where are the inlet and outlet valves located?
See,
All right, on Cherokee, which of the following conditions will cause a red brake warning light to lubricate?
B, fluid pressure.
B, fluid pressure during ABS operation. The pump motor is initially run. Now that's actually what they're asking is during the pump motor is going to be run during the build cycle. Obviously, if it's going to build pressure up, it's going to have to run it that way. I gave you it wrong. It runs it at vehicle startup, but that's not during ABS operation. You got me? Sometimes people will hear that pump and think there's something wrong. Wheel speed circuitry is, during the, during the startup cycle. That's the ones that I've been the most familiar with. It's actually going to shoot some voltage out, let it come back. I will tell you this, though. Here you got the self-test. It's going to perform the self-test every time the vehicle is driven. The startup cycle takes place when the key is turned on, and during the startup cycle, the cab checks the basic electrical functions and illuminates the ABS warning light. Now, wait a minute. I gave you the wrong information there. The drive-off cycle on this particular kind of system here is when it checks the wheel speed sensors, because it's going to see if it's getting a signal. So that should be the right answer to that.
Number 5 is drive-off cycle.
Yeah. The 40 miles an hour is your postponement. Yeah, Willie, that's what you were asking for before. 40 miles an hour is when it's postponed. All right, everybody, now, which ones we still lack?
We have 7, 9, and 10.
Okay. If any faults were detected during ABS self-test, the cab will disable the system to eliminate the ABS warning light to store DTC. There's 2 types of DTCs, latching and non-latching. Got me? In a latching trouble code,